I always thought we had the perfect marriage. I met Laura when we were both in college, young, ambitious, and deeply in love. She had this infectious laugh that could light up an entire room, and I knew from the moment I met her that I wanted to spend my life with her. We got married right after graduation, a beautiful spring wedding surrounded by friends and family who believed in us as much as we believed in each other. For 10 years, I worked tirelessly to build a good life for us. I climbed the corporate ladder while Laura pursued her passion for interior design. We bought a house in a quiet neighborhood, one of those picturesque places where neighbors wave and kids ride their bikes in the cul-de-sac. It felt like everything we had dreamed of when we were young. I wasn't naive enough to think that marriage was always easy. There were rough patches, of course, disagreements over finances, long hours at work, and the occasional miscommunication. But I always believed that our love was strong enough to weather any storm. I trusted Laura implicitly, never doubting her loyalty for a second. Every morning, I kissed her goodbye before heading to work, and every evening, I came home to a warm dinner and the soft hum of domestic bliss. We had our routines: Friday movie nights, Sunday morning brunch, spontaneous road trips when life allowed. From the outside looking in, we were the couple others envied. But looking back, I can see the cracks now, the subtle changes that I was too blind to notice at the time. The way Laura started dressing up more, even on days she claimed to be working from home. The increased number of girls' nights out she never used to have. The slight hesitation before answering my questions, as if she was carefully curating her responses. I ignored these signs, chalking them up to normal changes that come with time. After all, people evolve, and I wanted to believe that we were evolving together. But the truth was that I was too wrapped up in my work, too comfortable in the life I thought we had built, to see that Laura had already begun pulling away. That's the thing about illusions. They're only perfect until you see through them. And my perfect marriage? It was nothing more than a beautifully crafted lie, waiting to unravel right in front of me. As the weeks passed, I started to notice more things that didn't quite add up. Laura had always been affectionate, touching my arm when we spoke, stealing kisses when I least expected them. But that warmth had started to fade. It was gradual, almost imperceptible at first, but once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. She had become more distant, more distracted. When I talked to her about my day, she would nod and hum in response, but her eyes would glaze over, like she was somewhere else entirely. When I reached for her hand at dinner, she would pull away absent-mindedly, as if the gesture was an inconvenience rather than second nature. I tried to justify it. Maybe she was just stressed. She had taken on more clients lately, and her work had always been demanding. I told myself that this was just a phase, that couples go through periods where they feel disconnected. But then there were the phone calls. Laura never used to take calls in another room. She had always been open about who she was talking to, friends, colleagues, even her family. But now, I'd catch her lowering her voice in hushed whispers as she walked away with her phone pressed tightly to her ear. The moment I'd enter the room, she'd hang up or pretend it was something trivial. One night, I decided to test her. We were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, when her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She didn't reach for it immediately, which was unusual. Normally, she'd pick it up, glance at the screen, and either reply or set it down. This time, she hesitated, her eyes darting toward me before she quickly flipped the phone over so the screen faced down. That was the moment my stomach twisted with an unease I couldn't ignore. Still, I didn't confront her. Maybe I was in denial, or maybe I just wasn't ready to hear the answer. Instead, I did what I always did, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I convinced myself that I was overthinking, that work had simply drained her, that whatever I was feeling was just paranoia. But deep down I knew something was changing. And I was afraid to find out what. The human mind has an incredible ability to deceive itself when faced with uncomfortable truths. I kept telling myself that I was imagining things, that Laura was just going through a rough patch. But the signs were piling up, each one gnawing at the back of my mind like a whisper I couldn't silence. Her late nights became more frequent. At first, it was once or twice a month, harmless enough. Then it was every week. Soon, it was multiple times a week. Big project, she'd say with an apologetic smile. My client is really demanding. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But then there was the perfume. Laura had always worn light, floral scents, something soft and elegant. But one night, when she came home late, I noticed something different. It was heavier, muskier, something I didn't recognize. And the worst part? She smelled freshly showered. I asked her about it, trying to keep my voice casual. New perfume? She blinked, then forced a smile. Yeah, a client recommended it. Thought I'd try something new. It was a small thing, insignificant on its own. But added to everything else? It felt like a brick in my chest. Then came the change in intimacy. For years, Laura had been the one to initiate. She'd pull me close in the mornings, run her fingers through my hair at night. It was effortless, natural. But now, she barely touched me. And when I reached for her, she would tense, offering a half-hearted excuse before rolling away. I told myself it was stress. Work. Fatigue. But deep down I knew. One evening, I decided to surprise her. She had mentioned staying late again, so I thought I'd pick up her favorite takeout and drop by her office. Maybe we just needed a moment, something to remind her of what we had. I drove across town, excited in a way I hadn't felt in weeks. But when I arrived, her office was dark. Locked. No sign of her car. I stood there, takeout bag in hand, staring at the empty parking lot. My heart pounded as I pulled out my phone and dialed her number. She answered on the third ring. Hey, babe, she said, slightly breathless. What's up? Just checking in, I said, forcing a smile into my voice. Long night? Yeah, she sighed. Still at the office. It's been crazy. I clenched my jaw, staring at the locked door in front of me. Oh, I said softly. I figured I'd bring you some food. I'm outside your office. Silence. For just a moment. Then, the forced laugh. Oh, babe, I actually just stepped out to grab coffee with a coworker. I'll be back soon. I felt something in me crack. She was lying. I knew it. But I still wasn't ready to face the truth. Not yet. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, analyzing every hesitation, every forced laugh, every moment of silence. Laura had lied to me, there was no doubt about that now. But the question that haunted me was, why? The next few days, I watched her more closely. I wasn't proud of it, but something inside me had snapped. I started noticing little things that should have been obvious before. The way she was always texting, how she'd step outside to take calls, the distant look in her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching. Then, one evening, I got my answer. She was in the shower, her phone left carelessly on the nightstand. I had never been the type to snoop. I believed in trust, in respecting privacy. But my hands moved on their own, picking up the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. A message was on the screen. I can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? My vision blurred as I stared at the words. The message was from a number I didn't recognize, but the implications were clear. My hands felt numb as I scrolled up, reading through the thread. Flirty messages. Secret meetups. Mentions of our place. My wife, my Laura, was having an affair. And she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I set the phone down carefully, my mind reeling. The air felt too thick, my own home suddenly foreign. I heard the shower water turn off, the sound of Laura stepping out. I had to get out of there. I grabbed my keys and walked out without a word. I don't even know where I was driving, only that I needed space, air, time to think. But no amount of distance could change what I had seen. Laura was cheating on me. And the worst part? She was doing it in our home. I drove for hours that night, aimlessly circling the city, trying to process what I had just uncovered. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every breath felt heavy, as if my chest was caving in on itself. Laura. My wife. The woman I had built a life with. She had betrayed me. And not just with whispered lies or emotional distance. No, this was something far worse. This was deliberate. This was physical. And it had been happening right under my nose. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house felt different. This wasn't my home anymore. It was just a place where a betrayal had been carried out, where she had let another man touch her, where she had whispered things to him that used to be meant for me. I stepped inside quietly, the house eerily still. The glow from the bedroom light seeped under the door. I could hear Laura moving around inside, humming softly to herself as if nothing had changed, as if she hadn't just torn my heart to shreds. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat in the dark living room, staring at nothing, my mind running in circles. What do you do when the person you love the most betrays you? How do you go to bed beside someone when you know they've been in another's arms? I heard the bedroom door creak open. Babe? Laura's voice was soft, cautious. Why are you sitting in the dark? I forced myself to look at her. She was standing in the hallway, wrapped in her silk robe, damp hair cascading over her shoulders. She looked beautiful. Familiar. Yet suddenly, she was a stranger. I couldn't sleep. I muttered. She stepped closer, her expression unreadable. You left earlier. Are you okay? Was I okay? What a damn question. I just needed some air, I said, swallowing back the rage bubbling in my throat. She hesitated for a moment, then sighed. I know things have been weird between us lately. I don't want us to drift apart. She reached for my hand, her fingers grazing mine. Maybe we could take a weekend trip. Just the two of us? I almost laughed. A trip. A romantic getaway. While she was sneaking off to be with another man. I pulled my hand away before my disgust could show. Yeah, I said flatly. Maybe. She smiled, as if she believed me. As if she wasn't living a double life. I watched her retreat down the hall, my jaw clenched so tightly it ached. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. But I would be. And when I did, she wouldn't see it coming. The next few days, I played my role perfectly, just as she had been playing hers. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings, asked about her day, pretended to be none the wiser. But beneath the surface, I was watching. Every movement. Every excuse. Every damn lie. And she had no idea. I started keeping track of her schedule. She said she was working late on Wednesdays and Fridays. That was when I began checking. Her office? Empty. Her location? Always turned off when she left the house. She had never done that before. Then came the missing gaps in her explanations. One evening, as she stood in the kitchen cooking dinner, I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. How was work? I asked casually. She smiled, stirring the pot. Exhausting. My client kept me in meetings all day. Oh yeah? Which client? She hesitated. Just for a second. But I saw it. Oh, the Petersons, she finally said. They want a full redesign of their guest house. I knew for a fact she had finished that project weeks ago. I clenched my jaw but forced a nod. Sounds like a lot of work. She exhaled dramatically. You have no idea. Oh, I had an idea. That night, after she fell asleep, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I went through her things. Her purse, her closet, her drawers. I told myself I needed proof, that I wasn't just being paranoid. But in reality, I think I already knew the answer. And then I found it. Tucked in the back of her wardrobe, hidden beneath layers of old clothes, was a small gift bag. My breath hitched as I pulled it out, my fingers trembling. Inside was a neatly folded silk tie. A man's tie. One I had never seen before. There was a card, too. I opened it slowly, the words hitting me like a punch to the gut. I can still feel you on me. Until next time. Jay. I stared at the note for what felt like an eternity, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. Jay. Whoever the hell Jay was, he had been with my wife. In my house. In my bed. I gripped the note so tightly my knuckles turned white. This was no longer suspicion. This was fact. And the rage that had been simmering inside me? It was about to boil over. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every interaction Laura and I had over the past few months. Every lie she had told. Every time she had kissed me, touched me, looked me in the eyes, knowing she had been with someone else. I clenched my fists, the note from Jay still burning in my mind. I wanted to wake her up right then and there, throw the tie at her, and demand answers. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I needed to be sure. The next morning, I kissed Laura goodbye as usual and watched her leave for work. As soon as her car disappeared down the street, I sprang into action. I called her office. "Hi, this is Mark. Just wanted to check, has Laura come in yet?" I asked, feigning casualness. A brief silence. Then, "Oh, she's out today. Took the morning off." The morning off? I thanked them and hung up, my heart pounding in my ears. She had lied. Again. I grabbed my keys and followed my instincts. If she wasn't at work, where the hell was she? I didn't have to wait long for an answer. 20 minutes later, I spotted her car. Parked in the driveway of a sleek, modern house in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. A house that sure as hell wasn't one of her clients. I parked a few houses down, gripping the steering wheel so hard I thought it might snap. And then, like a scene from a nightmare, the front door opened. Laura stepped out, laughing. And behind her, Jay. A tall, well-dressed man. A stranger. Someone who had been with my wife. My stomach twisted in knots as I watched them kiss. Not a friendly peck. Not something that could be misinterpreted. No, this was passionate. Intimate. The kind of kiss she hadn't given me in months. I felt something inside me snap. This was it. The moment of truth. I had seen enough. It was time to go home. Time to prepare. Because the next time Laura saw me, she wouldn't be walking through my front door ever again. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers went numb. My mind was blank, yet burning with one singular thought: I had to end this. No more lies. No more pretending. No more letting Laura make a fool out of me. I had been patient. I had given her the benefit of the doubt. I had let her lie to my face over and over again. But now, it was time to show her that I knew. I walked into the house, the same house where she had betrayed me, and sat in the dark living room. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't heartbroken. I was cold. Steady. Laura was going to come home tonight, step through that door like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Then my phone vibrated. A text from Laura. "Hey, babe. Work was exhausting. Heading home now. Love you? Love me? Love me?" I nearly crushed the phone in my hand. But then I realized something. This was good. This meant she had no idea that I knew. I needed her to walk in unsuspecting. I needed to see the look in her eyes when she realized the game was over. Minutes felt like hours, but eventually, I heard the familiar sound of her car pulling into the driveway. I stayed perfectly still, staring at the front door, waiting. The lock clicked. The door opened. Laura stepped inside, tossing her purse on the table, sighing as if she had just come home from a long, honest day of work. Then she looked up, and froze. I was sitting in the armchair, bathed in the dim glow of the lamp, watching her. "Mark?" she said, her voice uncertain. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" I didn't answer. I just kept looking at her. Her gaze flickered, searching my face for something: recognition, warmth, the clueless husband she had been deceiving so easily. But I wasn't clueless anymore. She took a step closer, forcing a small smile. "Babe, what's wrong?" I stood up slowly, letting the silence stretch between us. "Where were you?" The question hit her like a slap. She blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. I mean, you weren't at work. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Of course I was. Don't. I cut her off, my voice sharper than I expected. Don't lie to me again. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I took a step toward her, lowering my voice. I saw you, Laura. I saw you with him. Her face strained of color. There it was. The moment she realized it was over. But before she could even begin to explain, to stammer out some pathetic excuse, I pointed toward the staircase. Go pack a bag. Her eyes widened. What? You heard me, I said, voice eerily calm. Pack your things. You're not staying here anymore. Tears welled in her eyes. Mark, please, Now. She flinched at the coldness in my tone. For a moment, I thought she might try to fight back, try to argue her way out of it. But she must have seen something in my face, something she had never seen before. Defeat. She turned slowly and headed up the stairs. I let out a shaky breath, my fists still clenched at my sides. But I wasn't done yet. Because Jay still needed to pay, too. I stood in the living room, listening to the sounds of Laura moving upstairs. Drawers opening, closet doors creaking, the muffled rustling of fabric. It was strange, how final it all felt. But this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about him too. The man who had stolen what was mine. The man who had walked into my home, touched my wife, and carried on as if I didn't exist. I wouldn't let him walk away without consequences. Laura came down the stairs, a small suitcase in hand. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. She stopped at the bottom step, looking at me like she wanted to say something. I stared at her, silent. She swallowed hard. Mark, don't, I said flatly. I don't want to hear it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Please, just let me explain. Was it in our bed? I cut in, my voice dangerously calm. She froze, her lip trembling. She didn't answer. I let out a bitter laugh. That's what I thought. Her breath hitched, but I had nothing left to give her. She had made her choices. Now she had to live with them. I opened the front door and stepped aside. Go. She hesitated, eyes pleading, but I didn't move. Finally, she let out a shaky breath and walked past me, suitcase dragging behind her. I watched as she got into her car, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. For a moment, she just sat there. Then, with one final glance at me through the windshield, she started the engine and drove off. I closed the door behind her. And then I picked up my phone. I had done my research. I knew where Jay lived. And now, it was time to pay him a visit. I drove through the dark streets, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Every breath felt controlled, deliberate, because if I let my emotions take over, I might not be able to stop myself. I wasn't a violent man. But tonight, I didn't know who I was anymore. It didn't take long to find his house. I had memorized the address from the text I found on Laura's phone. A sleek, modern place, just like the man himself. Everything about it screamed arrogance. I parked across the street, taking a moment to steady myself. Then, without hesitation, I got out and walked straight to his front door. I pounded on it. Seconds felt like hours before I heard footsteps on the other side. The door swung open, and there he was. Jay. Tall. Smug. Looking at me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. He didn't even seem surprised. You must be Mark, he said casually, leaning against the doorframe. The way he said my name, like I was some joke, made my blood boil. I took a step forward. Do you have any idea what you've done? His lips curled into a smirk. I think you do. That was it. That was the moment I lost control. I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the doorframe. His smirk disappeared as my fist connected with his jaw, the sickening crack echoing through the night. He stumbled back, clutching his face. You think this is funny? I growled, stepping toward him again. He held up a hand, wiping blood from his lip. Look, man, Laura came to me. You should be asking yourself why. I froze. I hated that he said it. But what I hated even more was that part of me knew he was right. Laura had chosen this. She had chosen him. That realization hit harder than any punch. Before I could move again, a voice cut through the tension. Mark, stop! I turned to see Laura standing there, eyes wide with panic. She must have followed me. She rushed between us, hands on my chest, pushing me back. Please just go. This isn't you. I looked down at her, this woman I had loved for years, the woman I had built a life with. And now, she was standing between me and the man she had betrayed me with. The anger drained from me, replaced by something worse. Emptiness. I let out a slow breath and stepped back. You're right, I said quietly. This isn't me. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there together. I had lost my wife. But at least I hadn't lost myself. I drove without a destination, the cool night air rushing through the open window, carrying away the remnants of my rage. My hands still trembled from the confrontation, my knuckles sore from the punch. But beneath the anger, beneath the betrayal, there was something else. Relief. Laura was gone. Jay was nothing more than a stain on my past. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't go home right away. Home didn't feel like home anymore. It was just a house now, filled with memories I no longer wanted. Instead, I parked by the waterfront, staring out at the dark waves, letting the silence settle over me. This was it. The end of my marriage. The end of the life I had spent years building. But maybe, just maybe, it was also the beginning of something else. The next morning, I did what needed to be done. I changed the locks. I packed up every reminder of Laura, every photo, every gift, every trace of the woman I had once loved. I shoved it all into a box and left it outside for her to pick up. If she wanted her things, she could take them. But she wasn't stepping foot inside my house again. Then I met with a lawyer. The divorce papers were drawn up, and I made it clear, I wanted her gone, legally and permanently. She tried to reach out. Calls. Texts. Emails. All of them unread, all of them unanswered. Whatever she had to say didn't matter anymore. The pain didn't disappear overnight. Some mornings, I still woke up expecting to find her beside me. Some nights, I still heard her laughter echoing in the empty house. But day by day, it got easier. I started going to the gym again. Reconnecting with friends. Picking up old hobbies I had long abandoned. And then, one evening, as I sat at a bar nursing a drink, a woman slid onto the stool next to me. She smiled. You look like a man with a story. I chuckled, shaking my head. You have no idea. She tilted her head. Want to tell me over a drink? I hesitated. For a long time, I had believed that Laura was the only woman I would ever love. That she was my forever. But forever had turned out to be a lie. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to start writing a new story. I lifted my glass and met her gaze. Yeah, I said. I think I'd like that.